Kimalat Baitsu. The United States celebrates its 245th birthday today. In our country, the 4th of July is a time when we gather with family and community, have a backyard barbecue or picnic with friends, line the streets of cities and small towns for parades, watch fireworks light the night sky, and proudly fly our flag. It's a time for patriotism and pride for the nation that we have built, but also of reflection on our progress of strengthening our union through inclusion and ensuring democratic and human rights for all. While we usually celebrate here in Botswana with a large event, this year we are marking the 4th of July virtually. I encourage you to stay tuned to our social media as we present our 4th of July theme this year, highlighting the critical role that women have played in the political development of both the United States and Botswana. The United States and Botswana have a long and strong partnership dating back to Botswana's founding in 1966. The past year was further proof of our enduring partnership and demonstrated that we are Mabohodinku as we work collectively to support Botswana's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, while continuing our efforts in areas such as HIV/AIDS, assistance to Botswana's security forces, helping underserved rural populations, promoting the rights of women, children, and indigenous peoples, and expanding trade between our two countries. In many communities across the United States, people come together on the 4th of July for an annual reading aloud of the Declaration of Independence that announced our birth as a nation. This truly revolutionary document fundamentally changed the way that our country saw the rights of the people and what Americans expect from our government. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The concept of inalienable rights, and that we are all created equal. These messages sent shockwaves around the world at the time, and still serve as the basis of how democracy is defined in the modern era. There is much to reflect on from the last time we celebrated our independence in 2020. The world continues to struggle with the COVID-19 pandemic, but there are signs that we are finally turning the corner. A year ago, there was no treatment for the virus. Now, we have vaccines developed in record time through breakthrough scientific advances that offer hope that the world will be able to manage the pandemic for the long term. I applaud Botswana for its strong efforts to secure vaccines for its entire population, and I'm heartened to see the number of vaccinated Botswana grows with each update from the Presidential Task Force. President Biden recently announced that the United States will donate 500 million doses of Pfizer vaccines globally over the next year, in addition to 80 million doses already announced, as well as some $4 billion in support of COVAX. This will hopefully help us finally turn the tide against COVID-19 worldwide. Meanwhile, I'm thrilled by this renewed hope, but I also mourn the millions who have lost their lives in the past year to this disease globally. Last year, the U.S. held an election in which nearly 240 million people voted, the largest turnout in modern U.S. history. This election and the contentious aftermath were major tests for the strength of democratic institutions envisioned by the drafters of our Declaration of Independence. And I'm proud to say that the institutions withstood the challenge. We also witnessed an ongoing demand for social and racial justice, leading to reforms meant to ensure that all people of the United States share equally in the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the rights that the Declaration of Independence enshrines. However, when the founders drafted that phrase, which has become a core American value, they had a different America in mind. Their definition of democracy was one that was only open to white landowning men. As a result, American history has been one of people fighting for inclusion and in expanding the definition of democracy. The 13th Amendment of the Constitution ended the scourge of slavery in 1865. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote 101 years ago. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s demanded equal rights for Black Americans. Stonewall launched the LGBTI movement, and the Equal Rights Amendment movement of the 1970s guaranteed legal rights for all persons, regardless of gender. Together, these are major milestones in our history, but as a nation, we are still on the journey towards equality for all. The Black Lives Matter movement is a more recent example of this fight. Our effort to form a more perfect union continues. There is another democratic challenge that both the United States and Botswana share, including women in the political process. In our country, women make up only 27% of the elected members of Congress. We have made progress on that in the past several decades, and we celebrate the election of Kamala Harris last year as the first woman vice president of the United States. But it would be hard to argue that women are equally represented in our government, and we can and should do more. Like the United States, Botswana struggles with the same issue. Just 3 women were elected to Parliament in 2019, and women make up only 10% of the National Assembly, a representation that is smaller than 20 years ago. I think it's fair to say that the voice of women is also muted in Botswana's national government. This year, we want to elevate the voices of women. For our 4th of July theme this year, we are highlighting that all that women have achieved, but also what remains to be done. Women have made major strides in Botswana. They lead major corporations, holding top positions in civil service, serving in the judiciary and security forces, and using their entrepreneurial skills to start small and medium-sized businesses. Women have seized opportunities to take leadership roles here in numbers and in levels you don't see in many countries across the region and the globe. But there are few women in elected office. Botswana is near the bottom in SADC when it comes to representation of women in the national legislature. There are certainly reasons for this, such as quotas or other steps to ensure greater political participation by women in other countries, but that's not the whole story. This is a problem we also see in our own country, where women make up only a quarter of the lawmakers in our Congress. The United States and Botswana can and must do more. We've heard many reasons for this, like party rules and candidate selection processes that favor men over women, or problems for women raising money for elections when it's men who control the household purse strings. We have even heard of much more troubling reasons that discourage women from standing for office, including sexual harassment in return for financial and party support for women candidates. We have also heard that these social barriers are the most difficult to overcome, and that changing a society takes too much time. But I disagree. There are plenty of areas where Botswana society has come together and collectively addressed serious challenges with speed and decisiveness, such as reducing the stigma around HIV/AIDS and embracing life-saving treatments. Botswana can change, and I say Botswana must change. What could be more important to all Botswana than the right of all its citizens to have their voices heard and to shape the future of their nation? So these are the barriers. What are the solutions? Well, this is really for Botswana to decide. We are trying to help in small ways, however. We recently launched a $250,000 project with our partner Democracy Works Foundation to raise awareness of this issue, build community among women involved in politics, and give women the skills they need to compete. Gender equality, particularly in decision-making institutions like governments, is a cornerstone of President Biden's foreign policy. The United States is committed to advancing the rights of women and girls, both in our country and worldwide. Our efforts in Botswana are a small slice of the larger commitment globally. But a program like this one is not going to change anything unless people in Botswana, particularly political party leaders, are willing to commit to change. And it is not just women we are trying to reach. Men need to speak up in support of women's right to freely engage in politics without fear of harassment or stigmatization. Men and women must recognize that with women in government, Botswana as a whole is stronger. Women have already been deeply involved in Botswana's political history, and without them, many of the key changes would not have happened. Women in Parliament were the reason for laws strengthening marital rights, laws against gender-based violence, and ensuring fair labor laws for all. Women in government have been key to the development of Botswana's trade policy, its legal code, its foreign policy, its social policy, and the development of the business sector. We have learned that without women at the forefront and behind the scenes, political parties would not be able to organize and run campaigns. Women are already integral to politics in Botswana. Both our countries have women trailblazers who challenged orthodoxy and unspoken rules that kept women out of the political arena. I think of Dr. Hausitwi Keti Chiepe, who was the first woman of cabinet in the 1970s and had a long career in government and diplomacy where she constantly broke new ground for women. She had the courage to be the first, and in the process provided an example for those that followed. Because of women like Dr. Chiepe, both the United States and Botswana have made many gains on gender equality. But this is far from done. We owe it to ourselves to continue this effort, to continue to fight to give women the voice they deserve in the political process. In closing, as we celebrate this Independence Day and reflect on the past year, I ask that you all think about what you can do to promote gender equality. It takes many voices to change the conversation. As President Biden noted, the United States has always been a forward-looking nation, one still striving towards that more perfect union. 5 years from now, July 4th, 2026, will be the 250th anniversary of the United States. Today, we begin that celebration with our partners at America 250 Foundation and invite all Americans, as well as our friends abroad, to help honor our past and to shape our future. Ke aloha.